What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Marvel Snap video. And today we're taking a look at the top 10 Series 3 cards that you should be looking to unlock if you are not Series 3 complete. In the latest patch for Marvel Snap, Second Dinner updated the token shop a little bit. You can now no longer buy Series 3 cards with tokens, which is a questionable choice. But on the bright side, they did add this new little feature where you can get one Series 3 card for free every season, so that is pretty cool. You can see I already claimed my card here, and I am Series 3 complete, and this will refresh in 1 week and 3 days when the next season hits. So I thought it'd be good to kind of give you guys my advice on what cards you should be looking to pick up for free. Let's go ahead and get into my top 10 cards here. But before we do that, I kind of just want to explain my thought process on the cards that I picked, because there is a lot of cards in Series 3. It is by far the biggest pool of cards in Marvel Snap. So there's a lot of cards to pick from in Series 3, and it was very hard to narrow down to a top 10 list. So, don't feel bad if one of your favorite cards is not in the top 10. Basically, my thought process was I wanted to include cards that were either archetype defining or just very flexible, good cards that you can fit into multiple decks. So those were two kind of my key components I was thinking about when putting this list together. So let's go ahead and take a look at my list. All right, so starting off our list at number 10, we have Mystique. Mystique is a 3-cost card with 0 power. On reveal, if the last card you played has an ongoing effect, copy its text. And they did recently update this card along with Absorbing Man and Taskmaster with that little bit of parentheses at the bottom there. It says if it's in place. So what that means exactly is, let's say you're trying to copy a Devil Dinosaur with Mystique. Well, if that Devil Dinosaur died to a Shang-Chi on the previous turn and it is no longer in play, Mystique can no longer copy that Devil Dinosaur. Now, even with this small change, I think Mystique is a very strong card in the meta. I would say its best home is for Patriot decks, being able to get +4 on all of your no ability cards with a +2 from Patriot and the +2 from Mystique is very, very strong. But there are so many decks you can fit Mystique into. So this is one of the more flexible cards in the game. You can fit it into Patriot decks. I used an example earlier. You can copy Devil Dino. You can copy Darkhawk. Darkhawk is a really good card to copy. You can copy Wong to pull off some insane on reveal combos. You could throw it into a Mr. Negative deck and copy an Iron Man. That's usually a very strong ability. So Mystique is an all-around good card that can fit into a lot of different decks. And yeah, this number 10 spot was very, very hard to pick. Like I said, there's so many cards in Pool 3, Series 3, whatever you want to call it. But I tried to narrow it down as best as I can. And I think Mystique is definitely a card worth picking up. Next up on the list, we have Death. Death is a very unique card in Marvel Snap. Costs 1 less for each card destroyed this game. So this is a card that is a staple in Death Wave decks. Of course, Death being half of the namesake of that deck. So usually you want to play this in conjunction with Wave. Wave sets everything to 4 the next turn of the game, and as long as you destroyed 4 cards within the game, which you can usually do pretty easy with like Killmonger and Carnage and things like that, Death will essentially cost 0, which allows you to play multiple cards on the last turn for a very explosive play. However, Death can also be used in some other decks. Death can also be used in Galactus. So this is definitely a card worth picking up. That way you can play it in a Death Wave style deck, which I believe is just all Series 3 cards. And then later down the line, let's say you play Galactus, well, you can just toss Death right into that list as well. So Death is a really good card that can fit into a few different types of decks. And yeah, I think Deathwave has fallen out of the meta a little bit, but I think it's still a solid deck. It's not a tier 1 deck, but it's probably like tier 2, tier 3 most likely. So yeah, Death I think is still definitely worth a pickup. Next up, we have Electro, and Electro might be a bit of a controversial take, but I believe Electro Ramp is actually a really solid deck. I think it's actually maybe a bit underrated. I think the only thing that's really holding back Electro Ramp from being one of the best decks is Shuri, because Shuri decks really don't care about playing one card per turn, because Electro Ramp decks usually want to run Sandman, and Sandman can shut down a lot of decks that like to play multiple cards on the last couple of turns. But Shuri doesn't really care about Sandman, so I think Shuri decks is kind of really what's holding back Electro Ramp from really being a top tier deck. But Electro allows you to do some pretty wild things. You can ramp into a Sandman on turn 4, which is nice. You can do a Leech on turn 4. You can do Doctor Doom on turn 5, and then Odin that Doctor Doom on turn 6. That's pretty wild. Electro is also a staple in Galactus decks, so you can ramp into Galactus easier. You can even put him in ongoing decks, since technically he does have an ongoing ability. You can do like ongoing plus Spectrum Destroyer. So yeah, Electro Ramp I think is kind of an underrated archetype, and yeah, I think it's a very solid deck. And the good thing about Electro Ramp as well is I believe it's a more budget friendly deck, in the sense that you don't need to run any Series 4 or Series 5 cards. Now, the example I'm showing here does have Black Panther and Nimrod, but you actually don't really need those cards. You can actually totally build an Electro Ramp deck with just Series 3 and below cards. So yeah, I think Electro's a solid pickup as well. Now, coming in at number 7, we have Wave, and Wave is another ramp card similar to Electro, but I think Wave is actually a little bit better than Electro, because I think Wave is more flexible. Wave, again, does fit into those typical Electro ramp style decks. Wave does fit into Galactus as well. But Wave also fits into Death Wave, and Wave also fits into a newly sort of recent deck archetype, which is called it's just like a good cards Doom Wave, I guess, if you want to call it that. I believe it was Double Los who created that deck. Essentially, you play Wave on turn 5, which allows you to play She-Hulk plus Doctor Doom on the final turn of the game, which can really swing the game in your favor with a lot of points. So Wave is just a phenomenal card. I actually don't use her that much myself, but I want to start using her more often, especially because I do have this lovely Dan Hip variant as well. But Wave is a really solid, flexible card. Enables a lot of deck strategies. And something I like about Wave is that if you pair her with She-Hulk and you float the 2 extra energy you have on turn 5. Like I said, you can play multiple cards, right? You can play She-Hulk plus a sick drop on the last turn. But it's also going to set the cards in your opponent's hand to cost 4. So if they were planning on playing multiple cards per turn, well, now they can't do that anymore. They can only play 1 card unless they have some other discount card on their board, like Sarah or Zabu. So it's disrupting your opponent's hand while also enabling you to play multiple cards. So Wave is a very strong card for that reason, and I would highly recommend picking her up if you don't have her already. At number 6, we got one of my favorite cards in the game. That's right, it's my boy Daredevil, a very unique card. On turn 5, you get to see your opponent's plays before you make your own. So information is a very valuable tool in card games. When you pair Daredevil with some 5-cost cards, he can be really strong, such as Professor X, Arrow. Even though Arrow has been nerfed, I think pairing Arrow with Daredevil is still a decent play. You can pair him with Hobgoblin, with Gamora. Just having that information is so valuable, and Daredevil is such a flexible card that you can really throw him into any kind of deck. You can throw him in a Devil Dino deck, you can throw him in a Control deck, you can throw him in a Galactus deck. Again, a very flexible card. And something I want to note about Daredevil as well is he might be the best battle mode card, because battle mode is a game mode where information is very valuable. You don't want to be risking giving your opponent so many cubes early on. You want to be kind of conservative with your cubes early on in battle mode. So Daredevil kind of helps mitigate your cube loss in battle mode, and it gives you that extra information on what your opponent is playing, and it gives you that information as to, okay, well, do I want to snap, retreat? Do I want to stay in this game? And the same goes for ladder as well, right? It gives you that information on turn 5 on ladder. Let's say you're trying to climb to reach infinite and your opponent plays something on turn 5 that you know that you just can't beat. Well, you can just retreat and get out of there and minimize your cube loss. So Daredevil, a very all-around good card. You definitely would pick this up if you do not have him already. Now, coming in at number 5, we have Patriot. And Patriot is one of those deck defining cards. Like I said, I tried to include cards that were either flexible or archetype defining, and Patriot is archetype defining. Patriot decks really need Patriot, right? It's the whole name of the deck. And like I mentioned before, he also works well in conjunction with Mystique. But Patriot is an ongoing card that's going to give all your cards with no abilities +2 power. And Patriot is one of, if not the most consistent deck to play in Marvel Snap. Now, a downside to Patriot is that it's a fairly predictable deck. Like, if you see your opponent playing cards with no abilities like Misty Knight and Shocker, you're like, okay, they're playing a Patriot deck, right? So that is kind of a downside to Patriot. But the upside to Patriot is that there's so many different versions you can play of Patriot, that you can catch your opponent off guard sometimes. There's Patriot Silver Surfer you can play. You can do a Patriot Ultron deck. You can do Patriot Doctor Doom deck, or I have this example here that's kind of a newer deck that people are running. It's like a Patriot deck with Valkyrie and Bast that can be really good. There's a lot of different directions you can go with Patriot, and I think he is a deck defining card, but he is also flexible as well because there's so many different types of Patriot decks that you can slot him into, and you don't really need a whole lot of other Series 3 or 4 or 5 cards to build around him. Really, I would say you just need like Patriot and Mystique. Those are kind of like the big ones. And you do definitely want to be picking up like Ultron and Wasp and Doctor Doom to pair with him. But honestly, if all you have is Patriot, you're good to go. You can throw in Patriot, and then you can throw in Misty Knight and Shocker, because those are beginner cards you already unlocked when you started playing Marvel Snap. Cards like Cyclops, The Thing, Abomination, Hulk, those are all beginner cards that you already have access to that you previously thought were useless, and Patriot actually makes them, have some value. So Patriot, one of the most consistent decks in Marvel Snap, and a very solid choice. Next up at number 4, we have Sarah. Sarah is another one of those deck defining cards. Sarah is the main card in the Sarah control style decks, and the example I have listed here is a Sarah Darkhawk control type of deck. That is definitely one way you can take a Sarah deck, and that is actually similar to the deck I used to climb to infinite this season, but you don't necessarily need Darkhawk to make Sarah good. Sarah is just a really good card. Again, it's one of those cards that if you could just pick one Series 3 card, and if you picked Sarah, like, you're good to go. Like, you can just throw her in a control deck and throw in some cards like Sentinel, Bishop, Shang-Chi, Enchantress, all these kind of cards that really have an explosive turn 6 that can turn the game around in your favor. And Sarah is really good as well in Silver Surfer decks. She's good in that type of deck. She can also go in a Mr. Negative deck. She can go in a Patriot deck as well, right? I think she is a bit flexible as well, but she really does define the Sarah Miracle, Sarah Control archetype, and it is just a really fun deck to play, right? And I think it's a very budget-friendly deck as well. So yeah, Sarah is one of those cards that has been at the top for Marvel Snap for a while, and for a good reason. She's just a really solid card. Coming in at number 3, I have Magneto. Magneto is not a deck defining card, but he's a very flexible card. Magneto is 6 energy for 12 power, which is a lot of power. And he has an on reveal ability to move all opposing 3 and 4 cost cards to this location. So Magneto, I feel like kind of was indirectly buffed by the most recent patch because he does have a disruptive movement sort of type ability, which Arrow kind of was the go-to card for that kind of ability. But now Arrow has been nerfed. I think Magneto might actually be the go-to kind of movement disruptive card, right? Magneto has always been a good card, but I think he might actually see more play more often now. And moving 3 and 4 cost cards to his location is a very strong ability. That means you can move cards like Cosmo, you can mess up a Mr. Fantastic, you can mess up a Thor, you can move a Darkhawk, you can take a Jessica Jones out of a stormed location. There's so many different ways that you can use his ability to his advantage. Now, sometimes his ability can backfire on you. It doesn't really backfire that often, to be honest. I mean, 12 power is a lot of power. And even if you don't pop off his ability, let's say you're blocked by a Cosmo, or there's a nowhere location where on reveal abilities don't happen, you're still playing a 12 power card, which is a lot of power. So I think Magneto is a very, very flexible card. I think he's actually going to be replacing Arrow in a lot of decks. You would see Arrow in decks like well, really every deck, right? You would see Arrow in Galactus, in Deathwave, in a good cards mid-range style of deck. I think people are going to start replacing Arrow and putting Magneto in that slot. So Magneto has always been a very good card in Marvel Snap, and I think he's actually just going to get better with this current meta. Coming in at number 2, we have one of my favorite cards in the game, and that is Dr. Doom. This guy is the king of flexibility. He's a 6 cost card with 5 power. On reveal, add a 5 power Doombot to each other location. So it's essentially 15 power for 6 energy. 15 power. That is just amazing. And Dr. Doom fits into so many types of decks. Like if you have a open slot in your deck at the 6 cost option and you don't know what to put, Dr. Doom he's never gonna be like a bad card in your deck, right? Like if you throw Dr. Doom in your deck, like you're not gonna be like, Dr. Doom isn't really doing much here. Like, no, Dr. Doom is always going to have value in Marvel Snap unless they dramatically change him somehow. I really hope they don't. I think he's actually one of the most well-designed cards and one of the most well-balanced cards in Marvel Snap. So I really, really love Dr. Doom. Again, you can play him in so many different types of decks. You can play him in the Doom Wave style deck. You can play him in a Patriot deck. You can play him in a control style deck where you're trying to lock down locations, like let's say with Storm. You can slot a Doombot into that flooded location. So Dr. Doom is a very good all-around flexible card, and he is a card that sometimes people don't see coming. Sometimes he can provide a little bit of that surprise factor on the final turn of the game to get you those 8 cubes or those 4 cube victories. And he can play his Doombots into those locations that say you can't play cards here because X reason. And it feels like we're starting to get more of those locations, right? You got Sanctum Sanctorum, you got things like Morag, you got Plunder Castle. You have all these types of locations that say, oh, can't play cards here. Nope, can't play cards here. Or only 6 cost cards can play here. Well, Dr. Doom kind of helps alleviate that pain. And yeah, he is just an all-around good, solid card. One of my favorite cards in Marvel Snap, if not my number 1 favorite card in Marvel Snap. He's definitely, as far as favorites goes, like just personal opinion, personal favorite, he's definitely in my top 5 somewhere. So yeah, Dr. Doom, one of the best cards in the game. Coming in at my number 1 spot, we have She-Hulk. Even though she was nerfed from 10 power to 9 power, which in my opinion, I think was a very fair nerf. This card is insanely strong. This is actually the only card that when all the Series 4 and 5 cards came out a few months ago, or I think it was last year now at this point, man, time flies, but I digress. This was actually the card I was like, yup, I'm getting She-Hulk first, because this is such a strong and flexible card. Costs one less for each unspent energy last turn. So it has natural synergy with Sunspot, which is the best one cost card at the time of this recording. So you can skip turns, you can float energy, and you can play She-Hulk at a reduced cost. If Doctor Doom is the king of flexibility, She-Hulk is the queen of flexibility. She-Hulk fits into any deck. She can fit into Death Wave, into Doom Wave, into Galactus. She can fit into any type of deck. Again, like I was saying with Doctor Doom, you know, she's not ever really going to be a bad card to fit into your deck. And let's say even if you don't play her at a discounted rate for whatever reason, I mean, a 6'9" is still a decent stat line. I mean, that's in line with America Chavez, right? She's kind of similar to America Chavez, but with the upside that if you float energy or if you play her in conjunction with Wave, you can play her at a discounted cost. So yeah, very, very strong card with Wave. You play Wave on turn 5, and then nothing else. You float 2 energy, so you can play She-Hulk for 2 energy plus another 6 cost card. Just a very, very strong and flexible card. She also pairs very well with Infinite, because Infinite requires you to not play a card your previous turn to play Infinite. So there is that sort of double She-Hulk, double Infinite combo deck, right, where you could play like a Magic, skip turn 6, play an Infinite and She-Hulk, which is very strong. She also goes into Shuri decks. You could play Shuri on turn 4, skip turn 5, play an 18 power She-Hulk, and copy that with Taskmaster. So 36 points on the final turn of the game. That is just absolutely insane. Just a really, really strong card that can fit into just about any deck. So those were my top 10 cards for Series 3 that I think you should be looking to unlock. And this is just my personal opinion. I know, you know, some people are probably going to disagree with me. And, you know, that's fine. You know, we all have our own opinions. This is just my opinion. But let me know what you think about my list. Let me know if you think I missed out on any cards. Like I said, this was very, very hard to put together. Some other cards I was considering was Lockjaw. Lockjaw is a very strong card in on reveal decks. I was kind of thinking about putting him in here. I was thinking about Dracula as well. Dracula's good in discard, but also zoo decks. So there's a ton more, right, that you can fit into this list. But yeah, these are just my opinions on what cards I think are the best based on how flexible they are, or are they deck defining or archetype defining. So that is list. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Hopefully we can hit 2,000 subscribers sometime soon. That would be really cool. I would appreciate you guys if we did that. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. And I'll see you all in the next one. Later.